Hey, everybody. Welcome to our critical Q&A today. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me live on this Sunday afternoon. Here I am broadcasting out of Denver. I hope, I know Mark and Claire do their shows on Sundays now, and so I hope you all are getting your 1-2 punch or whatever of good times. We got a lot of good stuff to I don't know about fun, but we got a lot of stuff to cover today. I've got Post-it notes all over the place here because I got a bunch of little notes I made for myself. Oh, good. Looking and sounding good. Excellent. Melissa is fantastic. She actually is chatting on the phone with her uncle right now, and all is well here. We are having sunny, warm weather in Denver this week. I guess, but it's not. The winter shenanigans are not over by any stretch. Let's switch over to the host and chat screen here. And I guess we're going to have some more snow coming next Tuesday, and it's going to come down like a ton of bricks or something, and we're going to have more of that. March and April are winter months still for us here, but Denver is so bipolar in its weather systems. It's really crazy. It's really, really, really wild here, and it makes it fun. It's never a dull moment when it comes to the weather here in Colorado. Let's get over and do the Benson cam. Let me see if my buttons are working here today. There he is. There's our little bundle of furry joy. Now, I went outside today. This was the sunny day we're having. And there he is outside. He's staring, by the way, at our backyard neighbors. We have a neighbor right across the way from us, and a half fence that divides us so we can see one another. And they've got a Doberman dog over there, and a kid, and cats, and various things that take up Benson's attention. And you can see him distracted by all of that today. He's fascinated by what's going on in the other yard. So that's where he's looking, and why he's not hamming it up for the camera necessarily this morning. I was just trying to get his attention, and he was just kind of not really having any of it. So anyway, there he goes. Yeah, you can see our backyard there, and I kept their neighbors off the camera, obviously, but yeah. So that's him there. Let's go back over here. Okay, and yeah, so anyway, welcome everybody who's arriving here, showing up. Let's make sure that we are good. Yes, okay, fine. Man, a lot of things to go over. So let's go ahead and start going over some of them before we get into your questions. Let me launch the Q&A. Start Q&A here. Please put your questions under this box. I think that's how it works. Start Q&A, and I will move the Q&A box over here to the little teleprompter we've got in front, and pop that up so I can read those questions as they come in. Okay, good. And now let's do some monologuing. I've got some things to go over with y'all. I don't know. There's a couple different things I want to talk about. Let's see where this goes. And give me your feedback along the way. I've been thinking about, I don't know if y'all watched the humiliating, embarrassingly awful bullying session that Trump and Vance engaged in with Zelensky the other day. But it was, it was pretty bad. And in a way that is indicative, what I wrote down here. It's an undeniable indication of how degraded the state of our politics have become, right? Which is hardly an original thought with me, but one that I wanted to share because there's a point that I wanted to go over from the psych perspective, maybe a little bit, right? I was watching that guy Vlad. He got my wheels turning on a couple things about this. And I thought it worth commenting on from the perspective of coercion, cults, cult thinking, extremism. You know, this is so tied in with our politics now that I can't pretend it's not. And I can't, because of who I am and what I do and how I think and how I approach the world, I can't make this channel just about entertaining you about things that you think don't touch your life. I can't be that. That's not what I'm trying to do here. My channel is not a distraction so that you can have some escapism from, life. By looking at how bad other people have it or something, right? And I know that's not what the core of my audience that is here watching now, live and otherwise. I'm not accusing you guys of anything. That's more of newcomers. People come and check out, what I'm about. And some people come and watch what I have to say and are like, well, this isn't entertaining. I want to be distracted. I want to be entertained. I'm doing my best to be entertaining, but the things I have to talk about are not meant to be distracting to you. They are meant to point out kind of what's going on and why some of what's going on is going on and what we might be able to do about it or cope with it or deal with it or recover from it if, we're coming out of some horrible, awful, coercive situation or culty situation, right? That's more my flow. So I watch stuff like politics and I use it as examples and things to point out. Don't do that. Look at this. This is indicative of this other thing, right? And mostly I look at it from the point of view of what it teaches us about us. And I think that's not clear all the time. I could be clearer in what I'm trying to do, but at the same time, I think a lot of people are so on such a trigger, on such a hair trigger of, just say one syllable that offends me and man, I'm just going to lay waste to you and, and this kind of thing. And that's what I'm talking about. That is the problem that I want to do something about as little or as much as I can. So I got to thinking about a couple of things I wanted to share. Okay. Government means to govern, right? Wordplay, here we go. Government, to manage, to guide the affairs of the citizens so that they can be safe. When it loses trust, it falls apart. Trust is lost through, well, there's a lot of different ways trust is lost, isn't there, right? You can lie to people and lose their trust. You can display favoritism and lose people's trust. If you think about, there's a lot of analogies between government and parenting. And I know that concept alone pisses some people off. No, the government's not my parents. I didn't say that. I said there's analogies between what government does and what parents do. There's examples. There's comparisons we can make, and and how do you create bad kids? How do you not do your job as a parent properly? You don't know what the outcome of your children is going to be, no matter what you do. But there are things parents can do, and there are things governments can do that are remarkably similar in how they can be guaranteed to mess things up or at least not make things better for the kid or for the citizenry. And there are two things I thought of on this. One is you obviously, if you spoil the child, give them everything, never say no to them, then you're contributing to the problem that is being created there as the parent, right, or as the government. Alternately, if you completely ignore the child and establish no relationship or attachment or trust or give any care to the child at all, then that is also just as much bad. You can go too far one way, too far the other, and you spoil the result. And I think government works remarkably similarly in that government, some people look at government as govern or manage, and that means control, and that means they're going to tell me what to do, and that means they're going to be they're going to have authority, and they're going to be authoritarian, and they're going to tell me to do things I don't want to do. Same with parents, right? You can talk about it that way, and you can go, well, parenting, you can make a case, you could argue logically to make the case there should be no parenting in the same way that people talk about there should be no government, right? It should be complete anarchy. And of course, anybody who really thinks about this knows that that's an absolutely ludicrous thing to say, and probably is a solution born out of, you know, somebody's trauma. So you want that balance. You want that balance point. You don't want to give them everything. You don't want to spoil people, right? But you don't want to ignore them completely, because both of those things will break trust at a number of levels, right? They break trust with, like with a family. If you have a number of siblings, you have you know, I don't know, 2 or 3 kids. And you're spoiling one of them, well, that kid knows they can't trust you really, because you're giving them all the attention while you're ignoring the others. They are very hyper aware of how the other 2 are being treated. And the other 2, of course, you've broken trust with, because you're supposed to be, you know, the basic agreement is everybody gets gets treated equally and fairly under the law, under the rules. And yet the favored child, the spoiled child, is constantly getting away with everything that the other 2 kids don't get away with, and they're being neglected, right? And this will break trust all over the place, and the family will just be a dysfunctional mess if you're treating your kids this way. Same with citizens. If there is too much favoritism, you know, toward the 1%, which is the situation we're in now, the wealth class has been for decades and decades and decades has been scooping up more and more of the parents' attention. Our government, right? Our more government resources, assets. You know, the relationship between the rich and our government is all out of whack, and we all see it. We all know it. And so do the rich too. They don't respect the government either, right? Because they can come in and have their way with it, and it's not a big deal. And this is how we end up in this place that we're in, where, you know, authoritarians and horrible people rise. It's all this mix of all of this stuff, and I just thought it was maybe worth analogizing it to that very, 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 very simple idea. Probably super obvious, probably didn't even need to be said, but I thought it should be said, because a lot of people are pointing a lot of fingers at everybody else as to why things are the way they are. And I think it is worthwhile for us to look at, maybe we're all kind of part of this picture and part of this mess, and that we're all actively creating this situation. It's not something that's just being done to us. I think that's a healthy way of looking at things, and that's going to roll right over into my next post-it note point today, having to do with psychosis. If psychosis is a sharp, pronounced break from reality, right? The definition of psychosis, if you look up psychosis, let's take a look at this real fast. Psychosis is a condition of the mind or psyche that results in difficulties determining what is real and what is not real. That's it. That's actually the definition of psychosis. It doesn't have anything to do with, as a definition, it doesn't have anything to do with killing people, murdering people, doing bad things to people, being evil-minded, being narcissistic. That's not part of that word, which I find very interesting. A mental health problem from the NHS website. Psychosis is a mental health problem that causes people to perceive or interpret things differently from those around them. Obviously, there's a little bit more extremism involved in it than just interpreting things differently, but the basic idea is this wild difference in the interpretation of reality versus what maybe, you know, objective, measurable, scientific, or group social agreement reality is. If psychosis is if it's a sharp, pronounced break from reality, then people who see monsters or enemies everywhere are psycho, right? We look at people who are narcissistic, or look at people who are paranoid, or look at people who act in a way that is clear that they are afraid of everybody around them, and that they have to get theirs before everybody else around them gets it, because if they don't get it first, then somebody else is going to get it and hurt them or destroy them or murder them, or, you know, they're not going to get along as well. It's all competition based, you know, thinking, and this is what drives our or capitalism these days. So, but also conversely, so too are those who don't see any enemies or issues just as psycho, right? Like you could see enemies everywhere, but you could also, no, there's nothing. No, everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. Or I don't see that problem there. You know, they're totally fine. And if anything, this is kind of what a cult attitude or a cult viewpoint is it's a minor kind of psychosis in that you are so curving your reality or so changing how objective reality is to make it fit your Pollyanna sort of worldview that the cult is all, and the cult leader, the guru, they can do no wrong. They're not to be criticized. And if you get into a point of view, any of us get into a point of view where people are above criticism, cannot be criticized, or you dare not criticize them for some reason, then you can see, all the problems start lining up immediately with all the cult stuff that we talk about. So I thought it was worth saying some of those things. So sorry, let me check something here. My computer is... YouTube is for some reason demanding that I now verify my identity. All right. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Thank you for verifying that. Now, completing my passkey. All right. Filling in my passkey, and we're back. All right, good. That was very interesting. All right, let's carry on here. Oh yeah, final thing I wanted to go over, and this is kind of where it was all sort of leading to a little bit anyway with this stuff. You guys ever feel let down by some of our professional fields of endeavor? Because I'm starting to feel a little let down by some things. And I don't mean this in a ranty, like, meh, meh, meh. I just mean I've really been thinking about some things with psychology, sociology lately, right? Neuroscience, these different fields. I've said for years and years that we need a multiplicity of viewpoints and disciplines to explain why it is that we act the way that we act. Why do people do what they do? That question has driven me for years, right? And that question is an important question. Why do people act the way they do? Pretty big question, right? Psychology is supposed to explain this, but so is sociology, but so is anthropology, but so is neuroscience, and so is economics. Economics is behavioral discipline. Excuse me. So, which one? Right? And I went to a meeting yesterday, political meeting here locally at the Hub. Not critical of the people there or the organizer. The point of this is not to be critical of these people. It's to point out that you don't know what you don't know. And when you don't know what you don't know, all you have is the things that you have to think with and understand to explain things. But what if that's not adequate? What if that doesn't do the job? You're walking around thinking you know something or thinking you understand something when you don't really totally understand it, or you only have that particular view, that particular discipline's view of the thing, right? Psychology, you can look at the world through the psychology lens of personal general mental health or mental health deficiencies or mental health issues or psychological issues or disordered behavior. This person's acting disordered, right? They're not acting in an orderly way. They're acting in a disorderly way. Well, we can frame that. We can call this narcissism. We can call this dissociation. We can call this, bipolar. We can label this behavior or this set of behaviors. And now we, can now treat or deal with or or approach this person a particular way, using various treatment modalities or methods or attitudes or ideas to try to address the bipolar or the dissociation. Or we have pharmacology, where we can, bring out some drugs or medications or chemicals and maybe alter the chemistry and change how the person feels. But is that a complete look? Does that give us a whole total look at this person and why they're acting the way they are? No, it doesn't, because none of us live in a vacuum, do we? So automatically, the concept of psychology as a discipline is not invalidated, but it's only part of the picture. It is only one part of the picture, a very small part when you look at you in a sea of social influences and conditions. So then we bring sociology, go, okay, good. Maybe psychology doesn't do it as a whole. Well, we have sociology, or we have group psychology. We, either social psychology, we can bring either one of these things in or both of them and go, well, let's take a look at groups. What do groups do? How do groups behave? What is group mental health versus individual mental health? What does it mean to be well adjusted? What does it mean to be sane or insane, rational or irrational as a group versus an individual? These are big, tough questions. Does sociology answer all these questions? Does social psychology deal with all of these things in a really wrapped it all up, got it all figured out kind of way? No, it doesn't. Hey, thanks for that super chat, Sam. But it gives us some answers, some part of the picture. It gives us something to look at. Sociology and social psychology. And I'm combining two things that are actually very, very different. Social psychology and sociology are very, very different things. Don't think I'm not trying to be super, super sloppy here. I'm just trying to talk in broad terms, and I know that I'm not being super precise or exact right now. I'm trying to talk about a meta problem, right? Which is that psychology doesn't do it, sociology doesn't do it. Then we add, okay, so if you have all this group stuff and you have all this individual stuff and you put it together, that should tell you why people act the way they do, right? But it doesn't, because it's not just what's going on in our heads or how we interact with each other in group identities or situations. Or social forces are not the only thing that determine why we act the way we do. You have economics, resource management, logistics, behavior driven by the distribution of resources and wealth and assets and all of this. This economic stuff is important. It drives everything as to what it is we are worried about, what it is we're secure about. Do we feel safe or secure? Do we feel threatened and at the edge, on the, hanging on a thread? You can be the most well-adjusted, least, best attached, best accepted in your community, right? Like, you can have all your shit together as a person and in a group, do your job, you understand your role, you get along with others, and still be an anxious wreck because of economics, right? Because you just don't have enough money or resources or the ability to get them or access them so that you can provide safety and security to your family and yourself, right? And so this whole thing enters in as a whole other problem, a whole other influence on why we act the way we do. And I bring up this because, and then there's anthropology. Cultural studies, cultural wars and trends and the changes of the social contract and social agreements as trends and fads and changing conditions, change us socially. We change socially, and the things we like and dislike, what's in, what's out. This drives our behavior, right? You want to be part of the in group, the popular people. This is most of our lives for the first 30 years, we're just desperate for acceptance, right? So all these things are coming together, and I wanted to point it out and say it out loud and say I've been a little frustrated with, there's not one place you can go where they really explain it all. And and you kind of have to put it all together. And then I look, you know, I went to this meeting yesterday, which was like this political meeting, this post-political forum, post-politics forum it was called. And they're talking about PR, propaganda, messaging, Dems, how the Dems are, you know, failing at that job miserably, populism, and what is populism, and how do you talk to people in that headspace versus people in a conservative or a progressive headspace, right? A lot of terms flying around, you know, you got liberal, but now you have neoliberal, and liberal is good, but neoliberal is bad. I mean, there's all these value judgments all over the place, and all these labels make it really hard to even, you know, get your wits around what group of people are you talking about at what period of time and what geography, you know, like it all gets really complicated really fast. And economics wasn't ever even brought up as a point of what was driving behavior. People were looking all through the lens of these other valid things, but when you ignore, you know, the whole thing I've been going on and stumping about for a few months now about economic disparity and wealth inequality, you know, in other words, the resources are distributed in a pretty fucked up way right now, where a whole bunch of the assets and wealth is owned by a whole small group of people. That has a massive effect on our behavior, right? And why do we do what we do? So I don't think psychology is adequate to the task of answering that question, is where I'm kind of circling back around to now. None of these things are. You have to take them all together. And I don't know how obvious that is to people, but having spent, you know, 10 years now driving my life, being driven by, if there's anything else that has been driving my life, I don't know what it is. The one theme that runs through my life for the last 11 years is what happened to me in the cult. And once that was resolved, why do people act the way they do? What is going on with people, right? And I think it's all of these things. And I think that I'm saying all this because I think if you limit yourself, or if I limit myself to just one of these buckets, psychology, sociology, anthropology, economics, etc., it's a limited look, right? And the experts in these fields fail when they fail to see that. They're so hyped on their bucket of information and the lens through which they look at it through the world, they look at the world through this lens, that they fail to see that there are other disciplines and other areas of study and knowledge that are just as important and just as contributory to the picture of why people are doing what they're doing. And this is all important because because you can't change or improve a situation if you don't know why it's happening. That's why this is an important question to me. It's not an academic ivory tower question. You know, I wonder, why do people act that? You know, it's not like that. It's more like, I desperately want to understand so I can help people better. And so maybe we can help each other better, right? By understanding all of these things. It's not enough to just throw a label of bipolar on someone and say that you've helped them or that you understand them. It's not enough to say that they are middle class and therefore you understand them, or they're poor. Okay, good. I know, I get it. None of these, you know, labels by themselves, or to say I'm pro-trans or transphobic. Either one, I'm an ally or I'm transphobe. Neither one of those labels are at all adequate to describe or evaluate somebody in and of themselves. It's one data point in a sea of information and disciplines that you have to really understand in order to get why this person is the way they are. If anything, that's just a symptom or a characteristic. It's not an explanation at all for why they're doing what they're doing, right? And we stop at the label. And I've certainly, you know, made stuff before criticizing, you know, labels. Of course, we use labels. I use labels all the time, but to think that the label is the explanation and that's all and that's it, and you're done, doesn't work that way. Okay, so there's my monologuing. I wanted to kind of say all that stuff. I usually I'm so, I'm so funny. What happens in my head is I get these ideas and I'm like, oh my God, this is really important. And I write it down and I'm going to share it with you guys. And then I share it and it comes out. And I always feel when I'm done, like, well, that was so obvious. Why did I just have to say all that? I didn't even say any of that. Everybody already knew all that. So anyway, hopefully you didn't know all of that. Okay. Okay, let's carry on here. Let's go to your questions now. Yeah, we're 1:30. Okay, let's get to your questions. Start and like every week, I'm just going to go down through the questions and bang, bang, bang through them before I even look at them. Just throw them up and so so I just want you all to know when I do these shows, there's no favoritism. I'm not picking and choosing. There was only one time I did that near the end of the show where I only had a little bit of time left. We do have two also preset questions from people had emailed me, so we'll get to those as well. X-Cyan, I liked the Cult of Obedience podcast you posted yesterday. Thank you. Thank you very much. I worked hard on that. Do you think Trump crossed the line in the meeting with Zelensky, or will most people in the cult still follow him? Your take. Okay, thank you for asking me about this. I'll try to keep my answer down to what you're asking me instead of pontificating on a long stretch here. Yes, I believe that Trump crossed the line. Absolutely. That what we saw yesterday or in that meeting was a gross display of abusive power being wielded in an abusive way. There is literally not one person in this world who has their hand on more power, more raw power than the President of the United States. That is true now. It's been true for quite some time. When you talk about, there was a big thing that was real popular a few years ago when the left was losing their goddamn minds, and I definitely include myself in that, about freedom of speech issues and canceling people and stuff, where a correct or, an accurate criticism that was made during that time of some displays of power disparity was called punching down. You're punching down, right? And this was a critique of comedy, which I agree and disagree with depending on the context, right? I don't think that's a general statement that is always true, that you can never or should never punch down. In other words, somebody who has a lot of power, using that power, to whack somebody further down the power totem pole, right? Punching down. This was probably, one of the most public displays of an abusive use of punching down, right, that has ever been shown to the American public on TV. And Trump's take on this, of course, was this will make great TV. He literally said that out loud because that's how he thinks. And you know how transactional he is in his approach to all his relationships. Trump, it's been pointed out, and I agree with the observation that Trump is, as a narcissistic personality, as somebody who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, which he does. There's no me there, right? There's no self there. It's a vacuum. It's an empty waste. And you're looking for narcissistic supply. You're looking for energy. People have called them, energy vampires or soul vampires or something. This idea that you're sucking energy out of other people is an accurate take in a way for what narcissists do, right? They are looking for satisfaction, personal feelings of what's the word? Ego. They're looking to fill their ego, right? Because they don't really have much of one. See, it's that it's Schrodinger's ego, right? It's both not there at all, very very tiny, but at the same time, it's the biggest thing in the room. I mean, it all depends on how you want to talk about it, right? Anyway, where I'm going with that is that the observation that was made that I agree with is that Zelensky is not somebody who satisfies Trump's narcissistic supply. He doesn't give Trump what Trump needs. He doesn't, appease him. He doesn't congratulate or give him things. And Zelensky's whole appearance even is objectionable to Trump. Trump is easily bored by him. Trump is not interested in the minutiae and details of things when it comes to foreign relations and things like that. It's the mob boss mentality of, well, what are you going to do for me? I have an offer you can't refuse. I'm going to get more out of this than you are because I hold more power than you do. And I'm literally going to lord that over you in the process of dominating you. And there's a lot of satisfaction that's gotten by a narcissistic personality in that exchange, whether it's on a personal level, political level, business level, however that is happening, whatever context is the situation it is that's happening in, the narcissist is getting the satisfaction and their supply from that exchange. And Zelensky doesn't really satisfy that for Trump, because Trump wants to emulate and be a dictatorial, powerful, authoritarian person. That's why he admires Putin. That's why he admires Kim Jong-un. That's why he admires Xi in China even, although not as obviously, because China is much more adversarial to us on the chessboard. Russia should be too, but Trump doesn't look at it that way because he admires Putin so much. He wants to be more and more and more like Putin. So he looks to Putin for cues of how to act and how to be, and that's why you see him servile towards Putin and giving him what he wants, because he wants Putin to be happy with him. He doesn't work for Putin, and I don't know that he's getting paid by Putin. I'm not saying anything like that. This is a psych evaluation sort of approach. So that's kind of how I see that. And Zelensky's the opposite, right? Trump sees Zelensky as weak, as small, as the agitator in this relationship. I mean, the things that he says, I believe he believes them in the moment, if he thinks about it at all. So he's just, so it's not the person who should be holding that office, because the entire personality, temperament, and approach to the job is so grossly irresponsible and self-serving, and everybody around that person, it really is a King Trump kind of situation, right? Where he really does need to be acknowledged as, the most powerful, intelligent, wonderful, amazing thing, right? And this is why you see, anyway, this is why you see a lot of people acting very much like toads right now. No backbone, right? There's just none. Okay. So do I think Trump crossed the line? Yes. Do I think most people in the cult will still follow him? Yes. My take on this in terms of what you're asking me as far as now Trump's followers, right? The MAGA following. And let's be clear, and I'm going to just kind of keep being clear about this as much as I can, right? There is a cult of Trump, and then there are other people who support Trump. A lot more people are supporting Trump who are not in the cult of personality of Trump. They don't worship at the altar of Trump. They see Trump will give them political, financial, or other influence advantage, or, like legal cover, Scientology. And they want that. And so they cozy up to that power. And let's not pretend that this hasn't been going on forever in Washington, D.C. But it's so obsequious and so gutless and so spineless now when you have, this sort of narcissistic type of personality there. So the cult following of Trump isn't going to, that needle's not going to move at all, because of this. They are going to watch everything that Trump says about Zelensky and about the situation, and they're going to agree, wholeheartedly nodding affirmatively, yes, yes, yes. It's finally time. Somebody put that little shithead in his place. Yes, yes, yes. It's a very good thing that we are destroying our allyships across the world because these fucking people have been taking advantage of us in all of these countries in Europe. They've never paid for a dime for any of their protection. They've never given anything of any real support. They've just taken from us. And this is just them repeating what Trump says, right? And this is Trump's very basic understanding of the world. Whether he really believes it or not is irrelevant. It's what he projects as the position of the most powerful office in the world. So it doesn't matter if he believes it or not. It's his position. And therefore, it's the position of his cult following. They mirror him completely. That's what it is to be in a cult. So that needle didn't move with those folks, right? They're still very much in the glow of, the new term energy, let's put it, right? The new presidential term, right? The second term that he's in. I don't want to say new relationship energy because they've been in this relationship for a while with Trump, but the power, the glow of all this newfound power and what they're doing with it is titillating and exciting to this cult base who don't understand what's the bigger picture of the consequences of what's going to happen. There's a lot of what can only be described as magical thinking on the part of Trump's base towards the future and what the consequences of Trump and Musk's actions and the Project 2025 stuff and the America First Policy Institute and all of these things that are literally tearing apart the institutions of our government. Those are all, yes, 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 because that's what we need, because this is finally draining the swamp, right? Coming back full circle to the very, very first mantras that they came on board with. They need this to be true so they can continue investing their time and money and attention in the cult and into Trump, right? They need it to be true. So you can't look to that group of people for your indication of whether the world is becoming more sane or more rational or not, right? You can't look to that any more than you can look to Scientologists to tell whether we're making any inroads in, they're not, the active, cultists are never going to give you that satisfaction. But are there people waking up? I think that at the end of all of this diatribe that I'm giving you, right, are people waking up, starting to see what's going on? Yeah, of course they are. It's going to be a slow roll, though. You got to have patience on this because it's going to take some time. Even as awful and horrible and crazy as things are rolling forward as quickly as they are or appear to be, and remember, a lot of that is purposeful propaganda to disrupt and confuse you so that you will be upset and agitated and not able to think clearly, so that you won't be able to fight back or organize effectively to stop what's happening. It's purposeful. This, again, I will just reference you to Steve Bannon and the flood the zone propaganda technique that he described many times on camera. And Bannon is not disassociated from what's going on right now. Just because he's not in the White House in an office, just like Elon Musk is, doesn't mean he's not doing the work. There's a lot of people who are carrying an awful lot of water for Trump and for what's going on right now. That's the only reason it's happening, So those people are very, very, very hard at work to keep going what's going. It's not just, you got to know this isn't just a one-man operation or something, right? This doesn't all just operate at the whim of one guy like Scientology does. This is a much more complicated operation. But yes, people are starting to. There are people who are being fired from the National Park Service, from USAID, from other federal institutions, and I mean FEMA, CDC, I think is being hit. The NIH is being hit. I mean, there's a lot of places that our government has been funding, running, operating, right, that are now being just machete is being taken to them very, very arbitrarily. Hack the, just line item. I don't agree with this. Good, it's gone. I don't agree with this. Good, it's gone. Right. That's what unelected people are doing in our government right now. With power being given to them to do so. So it's not like this organized chaos that's happening right now is. It's organized chaos. And there's a lot of people I've talked here before, and I'm just going to stay on this theme, that organized chaos and destruction is purposeful. It was organized, it's been organized for many, many years. And the closer and closer the Project 2025 people and the AFPI people and the Christian nationalist people, the closer and closer they've gotten to these goals, the more and more organized and the more excited they've gotten about this. And the more and more irons there are in the fire of, let's take this out, let's take this out, let's take this out. And that's what's happening. It's an effort to destroy. It's an effort to save the world by destroying it. Robert Lifton has talked about this. He wrote a whole book about it. It's called literally Destroying the World to Save It. And that is the theme of this administration right now, is they have to ransack and destroy the structures and institutions of our government to make it a tiny, tiny, tiny little thing. And this goes back to that family thing I was talking about earlier with, you spoil the kids or you ignore the kids and you get a bad result, right? You get a bad situation. Well, the government, the United States government, has now been taken over by the 1%. And it's so obvious now. It's not even like a controversial statement, really. I mean, if that's not an accurate way to describe what Elon Musk and Doge are doing right now, then I don't know what is. There's no elected representatives there. It's unelected people having their way because the people who are elected, who are supposed to be seen to our interests, are ignoring us. We're the ignored children in this picture, right? The lower class and middle class are ignored. They're not paying attention to us anymore. They don't need to. They've crossed over to where they only need to pay attention to the 1%, right? And that's why our government is failing us in a nutshell. And so, at least as I see it. And so more and more people are waking up to that, but it's taking time. I think it's happening faster in our current situation and environment than it ever would have in history because of the speed of the internet and social media. We have those working for us for once, but it's going to take a while. Okay, so there's my really long answer to. I wanted to just get all that stuff in. So I think now that I've gotten all that stuff in, if we have anything more about this, we'll probably have shorter answers on that. So here you go. Okay. XJW Vernon, do you think when Mike Rinder's two sons become adults, they may want to continue Mike's quest to go after Scientology? I hope not. I'm going to be honest with you straight up. I hope that Mike's kids are able to have a life that has absolutely nothing to do with Scientology, and that they can just kind of live a life that is much, much, much more creative, productive, and useful to them than fighting a legacy fight that their father had. He fought. I will say my opinion. I am not speaking for Mike Rinder right now. I'm not speaking for his family right now. I'm speaking from my opinion is that Mike did what he did so they wouldn't have to ever think about Scientology for the rest of their life. That's my view of that. So I hope that they, I'll just say that. Okay. Apple cider vinegar. Is there anything you miss from Scientology? Yeah, I miss some of the people that I used to know there. I knew some really great people. And I know this isn't exactly the answer that you want, or that you're probably asking me about, right? You're probably more about, like, is there anything about the tech or the methodology of Scientology? But there isn't anything about that I miss. I don't miss the structure and hierarchical thinking and organized nonsense that was Scientology. You know, when you open up a dictionary, you know, okay, I'm going to open up this dictionary now and I'm going to look up this word. Okay, there's the word. Okay, now let's see. I can't just read the definition and understand it. Okay, good. Okay, got it. Right? No. I have to. Okay, how's it used in this? Oh, that's the third definition. Okay, all right. Let me see here. Okay, definition number 3. Blah blah blah. Okay, what does that mean in my own words? Well, that means that. Okay, good. Let me use that in a sentence now. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. Let me use it in another sentence because one's probably not enough. Okay, good. Okay, that's number 3. Okay, I think I got that one now. All right, now I got to go to definition number 1, and I got to do the same thing, right? And 2, and I got to do the same thing. And then I did number 3. Now I got to do number 4. And let's say this word has 10 definitions. Now I got to go through every one of them. I mean, I use this as one example. This is word clearing. This is looking up a word in a dictionary, right? In Scientology, that process is clearing a word. Yeah, you see my point, right? Like, I don't miss any of that. If I want to understand a word, I get a dictionary, I look up the word. Oh, it means that. Okay, good. Boink, I'm done. You know what I mean? So there isn't anything in Scientology to miss from that perspective. It's just ritualistic, structured nonsense. And it's trying to take all my money. But I miss the people that I knew, because there were some great people there. And I wish they were out of the headspace, or even after they get out of the headspace, I wish they didn't hate me, because I don't hate them. I feel sorry for them. I don't pity them. Feel sorry is probably the wrong word. How do I feel? I feel bad. I feel heartbreak for the fact that they're caught in, you know, in this like stuck point of view that they can't lift the blinder off. That, you know, I miss those folks. Okay. Young Matador. Hey, when cults expand beyond their home nation, how often do they try and maintain rigorous control of foreign orgs? If they treat them like franchises, they could have more money but less control. Right. But that would make them sensible, rational organizations, wouldn't it? In other words, it's not a cult if it's not about control. I mean, that's the dividing line, really, between, say, a business, a regular business, and a cult is, you know, the degree of control that's being exerted over its members. So cults that go overseas or international work very, very hard to maintain rigorous control. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean they accomplish it. You know, one of the things that somebody told me one time, I was on the RPF with a guy who had been in charge of a very senior unit at St. Hill in England. And he got RPF'd from there. He was the CMO, the Commodore's Messenger Org. It was the senior management unit at St. Hill, right? Because I don't know if they have an RTC office there. So the CMO is basically supposed to run around and get all the things done that RTC wants done, you know, at the base. But St. Hill is pretty far removed from David Miscavige and from centralized management and from flag. It's literally an ocean apart, right? And things get pretty chill and calm and quiet in the beautiful countryside that is East Grinstead and where St. Hill Manor is. It's gorgeous out there. And it's not like there's a lot going on. It's quiet. It's pastoral even in some ways. And I'm sure the people in East Grinstead are laughing at me right now, but it's very nice. It's not the middle of Hollywood. It's not the middle of Clearwater, downtown Clearwater, right? It's far removed from places like that. And so you're out there and at day after day, night after night, week after week, month after month, year after year. And, without that intense pressure in person on your face, like they get in Clearwater and like they get in Los Angeles, things can kind of slow down and chill out, until somebody shows up from one of those frantic places and they look around and go, what the hell? This place is Slack Central. They used to, they used to call PAC Slack PAC. And they'll come in like a ton of bricks. And when they have to do that, somebody's got to be made an example. There has to be a head on a pike, is how Hubbard describes it. Literally, cut somebody's head off. Not literally, but, it comes from that old practice that was literally cutting somebody's head off and sticking it on a spike so the entire town could see you meant business, right? Hubbard described this in detail in his lectures, right? This is what you do when things are out of control and everybody's slacking off and the group itself is off the rails. You need to roll into town like a fucking ton of bricks, and you need to put a head on a pike and make an example, and everybody will jump to. And that's what this man, who I'm telling this whole story about, he was the head on a pike, right? He got RPF'd as the head guy of the head unit. Somebody showed up at St. Hill and was like, yeah, this place is way too sedate right now. You guys are not getting anything done. And so off he went. So you'll have actions like that to remind people in the outer zones, hey, get your shit together, right? This is why the Sea Org sends out missions. This was the original purpose of them, is to go out to orgs in places where they had kind of forgotten, as Stephen King would say, if you've read the Dark Tower series, you send out those missionaries to places who have forgotten the face of their father. I love tying this stuff together. I'm so nerdy. Anyway, so that's what I can say about that. Okay. Let's carry on here. Angry Chode. What are the 10 steps of auditing? Did you at any point while you were in Scientology realize that auditing was a farce? Did you ever get anything positive out of auditing? Okay. When you asked me the 10 steps of auditing, I'm not clear what you're asking me for. There are thousands of different auditing processes in Scientology, some of which only have one step, some of which have many. The general practice of Scientology auditing has many more than 10 steps from one point of view and less from another. So I'm not sure what you're referring to there. Dianetic auditing is different from Scientology auditing. There's objective auditing and subjective auditing. So lots of different steps for lots of different procedures. Did I realize when I was in Scientology that auditing was a farce? No, but I did realize on the RPF that floating needles were not quite as an exact science as Hubbard pretended they were, right? And I didn't fake FNs in that I never ever tried to use my hands or feet to fake a floating needle. I saw other people or heard about other people who did that over the years in and out of the RPF, but I never tried to do that. But I could think things or make myself feel certain ways that could produce a floating needle. And I could do that often enough that I could kind of get through my program and not sit there passively waiting for it to happen. I was very proactively trying to get through the RPF auditing. And it still took me over 1,000 fucking hours to get through with the entire program. And I was like very as they say in Scientology, I was very gung-ho. I was very like, go, like, well, we're going to do this. My auditing was about getting through the auditing, not just sitting there, you know, being a PC. Certainly there were times when I had some sessions where I was, you know, passed out or whatever. That happens in auditing all the time because of the nature of this, of what it does to you. But I was very motivated to get through that auditing, and it still took as long as it took. So those kinds of, you know, let's speed this up, let's get this thing done, you know, that was kind of how I was approaching my auditing when I was in the RPF. Versus when you're in an auditing session otherwise, when you're actually not under punishment and you're just there getting the auditing because it's something you're paying for, or it's something, you know, you're going up the bridge and this is for you and the session is supposed to be your session and it's for you, I would relax a hell of a lot more, you know, when I was doing my auditing outside the RPF. And it was a much more passive, do this to me and let's see what happens kind of attitude. And not let's see what happens from the point of view of let's see if this works or not. I never had a question of whether it was going to work. I had a lot of faith that it would work. And therefore, you know, you're asked questions, did you ever get anything out of, you know, positive out of the auditing? Yeah, I got all kinds of positive experiences. I had many, many, many moments of wild epiphany. You know, excitement, exaltation. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe exaltation is not the right word, but what is the word? I was energized. I felt enlightened. A lot of E words. You know, very excited. But it's an emotional spike, you understand? That's all it is. It's like, you know, boop. Wow, that was a real peak. You know, you get a peak moment. And then your life is back to, you know? It doesn't really change who you are. It pretends to. You think that's what it's doing. You tell yourself that's what it's doing. But then a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you find yourself repeating the same bad habits that you thought you had gotten rid of in your earlier auditing. Oh, I don't need glasses anymore. You know, Oh, I'm never ever gonna, I know why I get into fights with that guy all the time. And maybe for a week or two, you don't. You know, you're acting better. You're a little bit more aware of what, you know, you do or he does or she does. And you're like, okay, I'm not going to trigger him or I'm not going to do that. And you don't think like that, but you know, you just, okay, I'm going to change how I do what I do. But then you fall back into your habits, you know, you fall back into your action patterns. Just what we do, right? And these epiphanal moments, these emotional highs and peak moments, very, very rarely. I'm not saying they're incapable of changing your behavior in the long term. Some people do see the error of their ways and have a true change of heart or about face on certain things. That does happen. I'm not going to say it doesn't. But I'm not going to ascribe the power of that to the auditing, or because they had a result like that, make it out that their past life memories must be true. See, those two things don't have to be true at all, right? Just because you had an epiphany or you had a behavior shift or change doesn't mean that the thing that gave it to you is what it says it is. Something to think about, right? Okay. Carry on here. Eric Honecker, when you say about not being simply entertaining, well, Revealing the truth. Do you think this might be an ADHD autism thing about having a strong sense of justice? Not saying that's a bad thing at all. Oh, absolutely, Eric. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I will absolutely own that. You are not wrong. I don't know that it's an ADHD autism thing. Maybe it is. But I definitely have an overdeveloped, compared to what I see in other people my entire life, I will say that I have an overdeveloped or perhaps exaggerated sense of justice. Yes, I think that's true. And I say overdeveloped or exaggerated only because I don't think I'm wrong, or that my values are off, or that justice isn't, shouldn't be important. I have a big thing on it. But I notice in my life other people don't. So I go, maybe in relation to other people, this drives me more than it drives other people. It's funny because I mentioned earlier this question of, driving me, right? Why do people act the way they do? I don't suffer from the illusion that there's one answer to that question. Because people have seriously said, for example, in history, justice is why people act the way they do. Justice is what drives people. No, justice is one aspect of our emotional needs that drives people, right? That's why I come back to emotional needs as a rainbow of influences that drive our behavior. Justice, a sense of justice, of tit for tat, right for wrong, that's one of those emotional buckets that we call an emotional need. I got a big one. There's no question about it, man. Injustice pisses me off at a core level. I get my stomach gets all in knots. I get all like, ugh, when I see people being mistreated and abused. Big surprise, I do what I do, right? Yeah. That's what I can say about that. I think I'm owning it. Ex-Cyan. It's amazing to see it all going down, quote unquote. The fight for our democracy, our economy, world relations, etc. How do you think it will all play out? I think it'll play out like we've talked about. I think that there are cycles of history and that none of us are immune to them. I think that those cycles are driven by social forces, economic forces, and let's say world forces, things outside of humanity, our environmental factors that demand that we hit the reset button periodically, because we can't have a good thing. Human beings are horrible at stasis. It's another approach to answering this question, right, that I haven't tried before, so I'll try this one, right? All the things I've said before, I still believe very, very much. Economic forces, right? Cycles of history and a psychosis. We talked about that. I think these are important concepts. I bring them to you guys because I think that most people are absolutely clueless about this. As a general rule, people don't understand how history works. I say that because I listen to people, and I've been listening to people my entire life. And very, very few people pay attention to history for real. And other than using it as a quip or a gotcha, and they don't think any deeper than that. And history isn't there to give you gotchas and punchlines. It's what happened to us, and we can learn from it. We can learn an awful lot from it. And one of the things that I learned from history is that governments have cycles, that people, cultures have cycles. We go through these cycles. Hubbard tried to talk about this. This goes way, way back. I mean, Hubbard was just cribbing from the Vedas, the old Indian scriptures, right? And the cause, distance, effect, cause, effect, actually even more specifically, right? There's cause, there's effect, right? There's birth and growth and survival and decay and death. That cycle in Scientology is referred to as the cycle of life. And start, change, stop is the cycle of action. Hubbard boiled it down to that as an explanation for how things are created and survive and are destroyed. None of that was original thinking to Hubbard in terms of pointing those things out. This is stuff that's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old philosophically. But it's important to point out every now and again, these obvious things that are so fucking obvious to everybody aren't obvious at all in the way we approach our problems or deal with them. And so I think that thinking this way and understanding the world this way and framing it this way makes it make a lot more sense. It's the only reason I talk about it this way. I'm not talking about fate, and I'm not talking about kismet or God or some kind of supernatural force that drives these cycles. We do. Just us. Just regular old dumbass human beings, right? Being dumbass, short-sighted, selfish, mostly self-centered people, right? We fight for ourselves, we fight for our family, then we fight for, team and country. And it kind of goes, and our interests and our drives basically go out from us in that order. So corruption, self-serving actions that wear away at the structures of our systems are inevitable and unstoppable. And they're unpredictable to the degree that you don't know where it's going to manifest or how it's going to manifest. But what you can be 100% sure of is that it is going to manifest. People try to take advantage of any system you put them in. You do, I do, they do. All of us do this. Have you ever sped while driving? Have you ever taken a right turn when you shouldn't have at the red? Have you ever jaywalked? Have you ever not reported on all of your taxes? Right? Like, I think all of us can give a nice, big, hearty yes to every one of those questions. Unless you're in some social circle where it's going to hurt your social credibility to say yes. And then you'll say no, but the answer really is yes. And none of that is evil. It's just us being the way we are because, there's rules, but there's breaking rules. And we all know that there's lines that you can cross and get away with it. But the people who corrupt systems keep pushing those lines. It's that Overton window concept. It's that keep pushing for what's unacceptable until it is acceptable. And then suddenly it's normal. And that's how systems get corrupted. It's not one person or one group that goes in and undoes the whole thing. It's everybody involved, right? Until it gets to a point where one person or one group can come in and finish the job. And then you see that, you go, oh, they're the ones who caused it. You got to look a little earlier for when the foundations were being rotted out by the well-intentioned regular folks, right? Or the slightly not so well-intentioned folks, or the really bad folks who were taking it slow and taking their time at whittling it all down, right? But I hope you get what I'm saying, right? The foundation starts becoming weakened and the whole thing ends up collapsing. Because the other thing that we do that makes this cycle repeat, it's just constant rinse repeat, is because these systems that fall apart, government systems that manage the affairs or govern hundreds of thousands or millions of people at a time, you're dealing with very complicated systems with levels and levels of bureaucracy and organization. We all know this, right? So it takes time, and it can even take generations for the corruption to tear the foundations apart. And so we don't see on a day-to-day this process play out. What we see on a day-to-day is much more short-term stuff, and we blame the short-term stuff for the long-term problems. And that's our short-sighted, egotistical, wrong-headed thinking. It's all about us, and it's all about our problems in that situation. And so we only think in those terms, and we don't look at the big picture and why the whole thing does what it does, right? And this is why we're doomed to repeat the cycles. And that's why historians and, you know, economics people and government people, you know, who do study this stuff kind of understand it, but then they try to communicate it, and the problem becomes communicating to the masses concepts that are not easy for the masses to assimilate, right? Yeah, so it's a lot. Hope that's my basic understanding of why things that are happening right now in a big picture. So how I think this is going to play out is that we are going to continue to see from this point on, more and more uncivil behavior, attack-like behavior, antagonistic behavior by our political leaders, pushing the limits, grabbing more and more power. Now, there's a government problem, and there's a billionaire problem, for lack of a better word, right? I mean, it's not just billionaires, but, you know, it's like this 1% problem. There's a technology problem. There is a climate problem, and there is a global economic asset management problem. Just those, what did I just say? 5 things? Just those 5 things alone. Any one of those is a lifetime of study to really understand all the ins and outs of it and figure out how to do something about it. But together they form this perfect storm of awful that the world is sort of in that phase of right now. So solutions are not easy if you want to, like, how do we get this back to a parity where soft power is how international relations work, not this hard power, you know, yes, we'll help you, but you have to give us all your mineral reserves, right? That's hard power. That's, you know, that's like throwing your weight around. That's being a bully. That's being self-interested over planet interested. Right? We had this really nice window of time where we had that we grew up in, where we had a sort of global awareness and social neighborhood sort of attitude about the world stage. And a lot of us would like to go back to that more calm and more rational way of the world being ordered, right? The world order. But we're not going back to that. That phase is past us now. And we're back into, well, we never really left, but we're in a more obvious place where power and might is right is being exerted as a political concept, as a doctrine, as a political doctrine, right? As a way of acting. The U.S. has got gloves are off. Right? These folks are no longer acting civilly. They're acting exactly like who they really are and have always been, and who we've tried to, you know, been screaming, please listen to us. These people are not who they present themselves to be. And it's going to take a while for everybody to catch on to that, right? Because people get really misty-eyed about, you know, their heroes and their gurus. We all know that. So I think this is going to play out I think this is the most unpredictable thing to predict. How do you predict irrational, power-grabbing, megalomaniacal behavior that is driven solely by self-interest? Right? How can you predict something like that, right? Who could have predicted the Sea Org? I mean, let's go back to something totally different, right? L. Ron Hubbard, 1965, sets up, you know, shop is running. Things are going. Scientology is expanding. Things are going pretty good. You know, the government's kind of giving them some gruff here and gruff there and problem here and problem there. But generally, it's kind of going. And then suddenly, the IRS, not suddenly really, but, you know, it looks sudden, 1967, L. Ron Hubbard, you're fucking guilty of inurement. Yeah, we're taking your tax exemption away from you. Who could have predicted that in 1965 or 66? Who didn't have inside information on what the IRS was doing? Nobody could have predicted that. Nobody did predict that. And it changed everything. Everything changed on a dime. Scientology changed overnight, right? Because Hubbard took off and was no longer running things and was off on the ocean where he was actually running things, but he said he wasn't, but he was. And the number of lies and deceptions and deceitful behavior and abusive behavior just keeps getting cranked up and up and up and up. In 1965, no one in Scientology ever even imagined that in 3 or 4 years, by 1969, L. Ron Hubbard would be on a boat with a little flotilla of ships, running a crew of OT Scientologists, the most dedicated fanatics of Scientology. He would have gathered them around him, and he would be making them push peanuts down a wood deck with their nose as punishment when he wasn't throwing them over the side of the ship. No one would have said that that was even remotely possible in 1965 and 1966. 2 to 3 years later, that's what was happening. Children in chain lockers, people being thrown overboard, and Hubbard laughing and taking pictures the entire time. So I sit here right now and you ask me, how do I think this is all going to play out? I think it's going to play out looking an awful lot like that, but it's going to take a while longer. And it depends so much on what all of us do to stop that from happening before it happens, not when it's too late and it's already happening and we can't stop it. Because if you were on the deck of the ship in 1969 as a Class 8 trainee, 68, right? 1968. If you're a Class 8 trainee, one of the staff members from a Scientology org, and you're brought to the boat to train on the highest auditing level there is in Scientology, and you're all starry-eyed and googly-eyed about L. Ron Hubbard and meeting him and meeting the Sea Org and being on this boat, and suddenly you're being thrown off the side and you're pushing peanuts down a deck with your fucking nose in the hot sun as punishment because you didn't write your notes right during your auditing sessions. You didn't see that coming. There's no way you could have seen that coming. And if anybody had told you that was coming, you would have told them that they're insane, irrational freaks. And how dare they try to defame L. Ron Hubbard to you that way? And yet, that's exactly what happened. You know, you can say and say and say this stuff to people, but until it's happening to them, they don't believe it, and then it's too late. This is why all that history shit is so important, right? Anyway, I don't mean to be all like whatever. We have hope. There are reasons to hope here. I don't want to be like doom and gloom, but I am being very, very honest with you and answering these questions because I don't know how else to be. And it's kind of that way right now. So, you know, we got to organize and we got to get some effective leadership and we've got to be good followers and we've got to organize way better than we are right now, you know, and I don't know if we're capable of doing that. So I don't know where we're going with all this. I don't know. I would like to have more reasons to hope, and I would like you all to share those with me as we go forward. My reasons to tell you to hope have to do with our ability to see what's going on, discern coercive control from regular governmental control, because they're not the same, and, you know, and try to find some leadership or support leadership that understands the problems that we're really facing right now. And so far, I'm upset because I see individuals pointing out very smartly very specific problems that explain and predict an awful lot of what's going on, and those voices are being ignored by the powers that be, who are so enamored with themselves and their side that they can't stop being part of a side long enough to step out of their, little euphoric delusional dream state, right? About where things are going, bad and good. Because there's some of y'all who, and I fall into this too, who go too doom thinking too fast, right? We've got time, but don't waste the time that we have right now. That's kind of where we're at, as I see it. Yeah, but hard power refers to military force or actions. I looked this up, not necessarily. Hard power also does refer to strong arming or use of tit for tat, in a kind of pushy, bullying way. It doesn't have to just be force of arms, but there is, of course, always force of arms behind that kind of rhetoric. But it doesn't have to be outright military action in order for it to be considered hard power, as I'm using the term. If I'm wrong about that, I'm wrong, but that's how I've understood it as I'm talking about it here today. Thanks for bringing that up, just to clarify that point. Okay. All right, X-Cyan. What are dreams? Do they have any meaning, and are they worth any analyzing? Thanks for asking me this. I have opinions. And they're pretty simple, actually. I've spent a little bit of time going down some rabbit holes on sleep. Sleep interpretation and sort of a more Jungian kind of archetypical approach to dreams and stuff is something I grew up with, and I used to have this kind of thinking about, not because of it wasn't a Scientology influence thing. It was external to that. I used to be really into the paranormal and psychics and ESP and all that shit. I used to read voraciously of that as a child, and I was super, super interested in that field. And, the idea of being a parapsychologist was not, a weird idea to me. It was something I thought about doing. It's funny to me, just as an aside right now, it's funny to me that I look at my childhood interests in filmmaking and special effects and cinematography and psychology and parapsychology, and look at where I am right now. I think there's something funny and interesting to be seen there, that this is where I ended up. Anyway, dreams. I think dreams are electric storms of random electric firings in your head at night as your brain is recalibrating and resettling and doing the things that the brain does when you're in a sleep state. I think, and it does a lot. Your ears are never not listening. Even in your sleep, when somebody says your name, your brain processes that differently than other sounds, right? And it could wake you up just because somebody says your name. So there's always that going on. There is always this awareness of things going on around you that your brain is operating at some level, but it's not a conscious level, obviously. Consciously, you got the executive functions kind of in shutdown a little bit, as I understand it, and so a lot of random things are happening in a brain in a restful state, and this sort of REM, this rapid eye movement sleep thing when the dreams happen, right? And I'm no expert on this, but like I said, I've read a little bit. I can throw some of these words around. And the explanation that made the most sense to me with what I understand about how processing in the brain works and information processing, right, is that you are interpreting after the fact the loads of sensory perception, random sensory perception and memory perception that you're getting, and turning it into something that makes sense to you as you're experiencing it or after the fact of experiencing it. I'm not sure which. That's how I understand it. And I don't know that there's a whole lot there to analyze. I believe that that dreams could be or could include incidents or images or perceptions of significance to a person in terms of, maybe problems they're trying to sort out or answers they're trying to come up with. The brain is constantly running these things below your awareness, right? You can know that. So there's all kinds of processing going on that only some of it floats up to what you think of as your conscious experience, right? So could there be fodder for analysis there at a psychological level? Yes, but at the same time, you could be overanalyzing something that's just random and really doesn't have a whole lot of significance. We are capable of assigning any amount of importance to anything we want, and that doesn't mean that it really is that important. That's the trick about analysis. It's about psychoanalysis that can be quite tricky. Just because you think something's important doesn't necessarily mean it is. Or maybe it is important, but not for the reasons you think it is. And sorting that out is when you have a therapist who knows what they're doing or is experienced or is, the good ones are the ones who can really tune in with you and help you analyze and figure that stuff out for yourself. I think there's probably some use in that, but I think there's probably more. My personal take is, I think there's an overemphasis on the importance of dreams in the same way that tarot or astrology put an overemphasis on coincidental, circumstances of stars and playing cards or, crystals. I think we can overindulge in this, in other words, and make more of it than we should. My take. Anthony Spurgeon, what's your favorite depiction of a cult in film or TV? Ooh, that's a good question. So far, I'm going to say Severance. I think so. We're rewatching it right now. We watched season 1. Season 2 is rolling out right now, and we're rewatching season 1, and then we're going to roll right into season 2. And then well, we'll see what happens with that in terms of video production. I'm so guilty of overpromising, so I'm trying not to do that anymore. But I have things I want to discuss about Severance already, and we're only like 2 episodes into the rewatch, and I've got like a notepad full of notes. I mean, there's just so much to talk about with Severance, that TV show. It's on Apple TV, right? Adam Scott, Ben Stiller directed. It captures business culture, cult culture, belief, confirmation bias, minor authoritarian control, and how that can have major effects. I mean, they're not beaten on these people. They physically alter them in what's supposed to be an irreversible way, but apparently it's not irreversible. It's an interesting show. And I know it wasn't written just to be a treatise on cults. It's really taking a lot more of its inspiration from the work business cult culture, you could say, of the Western nations. So I say Western nations because I'm always trying to include Europe and the UK in America's silliness when it comes to how we manifest capitalism, right? We manifest it in a very culty way, especially what it's developed into, which is a big part of why things are the way they are, by the way, right now, and why we're crashing and burning so badly is because capitalism has gotten so extravagantly out of control with the 1% taking advantage and fucking up the resource distribution just left, right, and center, right? In other words, we're broke and they're rich and they own everything and we need to pay them to have anything. That's all out of whack, right? And it's not sustainable and it's not going to last forever. The big question in the sand is always, how long is it going to last, right? So I think Severance is more a reflection of that business side of the world that occupies so much of our time and attention, that is not, strictly speaking, a cult, but man, is it cult adjacent in so many ways, right? And people agree to be abused, right? So they can get a paycheck. And you go, man, this is, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. But it's really fucked up how people are taken advantage of. So anyway, I think Severance is a really, really good analysis or look at that with all this quirky, weird, very sinister tone. It's so well made. That's why it's my favorite so far, I mean, obviously I'm rewatching it right now too, so it's fresh on my mind, but I'm struggling to think of anything better in terms of cult stuff. I haven't watched Handmaid's Tale yet. I've heard it's pretty good. Bunch of documentaries and stuff about cults out there that we've talked about that are quite good. But as far as TV, film stuff, right, depictions of cults. Yeah, I'm going to stick with that answer for now. I think I'll stick with that one. Yeah. Yeah, Midsommar. I just say Midsummer. It's funny. It's coming up in a couple of the comments here. I haven't watched the entire movie yet. I'm familiar with the story, and I skipped through some stuff on it just the other day, in fact. But I haven't watched it all the way through, so I probably shouldn't comment except to say, not the best. Not from what I saw, but I got to watch the whole thing still. So I'll reserve my final. Shouldn't be saying anything about that without having watched it all the way through. Okay, let's carry on. X-Scion, is Donald Trump an SP? A petulant child? How about both? And so much more. There's a number of ways to break down Donald Trump, and we've done it, I think, so many ways here already. I want to say this. Other people have said this. I'll say this. Beyond the psychoanalysis of the man as an individual, which I think experts have covered quite well, he's not. It took me a while to get my head around this one, actually, because having lived through it like all of you guys have, right? It's hard to get my head around this one for a while, but I agree with this now, and that is that Trump isn't the cause of what's happening right now. He's a symptom of it, which does not let him off the hook for one bad, illegal, abusive, horrible thing that he's done his entire life. And he's full of those things. His list is very, very long. But he didn't cause any of this individually. If we had our collective shit together, you, me, and thee, if this country had its collective shit together, and if our government governed remembering that it's a government for all the people, not just for fucking 1% of them, right, which they grossly forgot about 50 years ago, is when the capstone was put on that. And this is how long it's taken for it to become this obvious to everybody that that's what's going on. It's been going on for a long time, my entire life. So to have an individual like a Trump be able to ascend to the White House means so many switches and safeguards and things in our system that were designed to stop that from happening have been corrupted and tarnished and eroded or corroded into non-existence or failure, right? They just don't work. Those checks and balances within our system failed us miserably years and years and years ago. It's not irrational to me to connect the dots between Richard Nixon resigning in disgrace from the White House and being pardoned by his successor, Gerald Ford. That act of pardoning a criminal who should have gone to jail for the crimes he committed as the president of the United States, instead of having some fucking backbone and standing up for the rule of law all the way to our leadership back in the 1970s, Gerald Ford instead bent over and pardoned a criminal. That opens the door to what we have now. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. When you look to earlier instances of how the foundations of our system were eroded away, right? I'll make that point today on that. I don't know. Tell me if you agree with me or not. Am I out to lunch on that? Let me know. You know, that's how I'm thinking about it. Okay, Sam Slade, here you are. As a never in, I have trouble understanding how public Scientologists can be regged to death, undergo incredible credit card debt because of this, and stay afloat. Are they working extra jobs? Oh, Sam, let me tell you. Yes, they do. Scientologists will take credit card after credit card, job after job, debt after debt, borrow money from other Scientologists, use college funds, mortgage their house, double mortgage their house, triple mortgage their house, sell their cars. Just kind of running through all the things I've seen people do right in front of me in order to buy or afford Scientology services. All of those things, right? Cash in their kids' college fund, cash in their 401k, take loans off of their pension, off of their Social Security, retirement money. I've seen all of that. When you get people wide-eyed and infused with, you know, the kind of reckless hope that Scientologists, the beginning Scientologists, or that Scientologists can you know, wallow in, can really go all in on, they'll do anything. And they will work and work and work. And they'll do it all the way up to the point that they can't, or something finally, some light bulb finally goes off and they realize, oh, I can't. I've reached my limit now. I can't go any more than this. This is it. And if that, and if they realize that too late, then of course it's bankruptcy time. And there are tons and tons of Scientologists who end up in bankruptcy court, or filing bankruptcy at least. Borrow money from relatives as well, of course, right? Yeah, all of that. So that's kind of why, right? So you have trouble understanding how they can be regged to death, and are they working extra? Because they are desperate for what they believe Scientology is going to offer them or give them, right? Peace of mind, calmness, abilities, causative abilities in their lives, the ability to pull in more money. This is the promise that all Scientologists are told all the time, like almost 100% of the time. You're told, well, you're going to invest this money. This is an investment in you. And the return on this investment is going to be stellar, quantum, astronomical, amazing, you know, blah, 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 ad astra. You're going to the stars, baby. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you can't help but succeed like crazy, and you're going to make so much money that you're going to pay all this back and afford the rest of your bridge, and it's going to be awesome. And Scientologists, new Scientologists, or people trying to make it on up the line, see very rich Scientologists, the guys who get the trophies, and the awards and get on stage with Miscavige. And they believe, or they tell themselves a story, that those people were broke-ass bitches just like them at one time. And if they can do it, I can do it. And they did it because they got up the bridge. And if they can get up the bridge and get rich, so can I, right? I will say this, though. I believe it is true. This is conjectural. But I believe, understanding how I understand things economically and sort of in the world now, I believe this has everything to do with why Scientology isn't expanding like it used to be. We all credit Scientology as failing because of all the exposure, because people are on to the con. I think that's true, that more people are more aware of how bad Scientology is. And yes, I believe that that is a reason why Scientology is not expanding. But I don't think it's the main reason. I believe the main reason why Scientology is not expanding anymore is because the demographics of Scientology and the economics of the world have changed. And the demographics of Scientology classically are middle class. And the middle class can't afford Scientology anymore. They don't have the money for it. And because they don't have the money for it, they're not reaching for it. They don't go and buy the bullshit of it because they don't have the money for it. So it's not even an option. Now, I'm not saying it's more complicated than just this, but I'm in that. No, I actually don't think it's more complicated than this. Actually, I think this is actually about how it is, right? It's like people just can't afford it anymore. So it's becoming more and more of a cater to the 1%, cater to the wealthy, cater to the rich, cater to that group of people is where Scientology is going. And I think that's one of the reasons why it had to go over into real estate, actually. So I think there's less instances of people mortgaging the houses, all that kind of crap compared to what we saw in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when Scientology was really in the heyday of that. Since the 2000s, they've been in the heyday of, they've still been regging like crazy, but they're not even really regging for services. They're regging for buildings and for IAS statuses. And that's the kind of thing that very rich people give money to, more so than middle and lower class people can give money to. You see what I mean? So the emphasis of Scientology has been get the money for whatever we can get these schleps to give it to us for. And it turns out that that's, that real estate and membership statuses it's easier to get money extracted from wealthy people for that than it is to keep credit card defrauding the lower and middle class demographic of Scientology. I hope that all makes sense. I hope I'm saying this all, understandably. That's why I believe the chase wave that we saw in COVID or at the end, COVID capped it off, right? But that whole chase wave thing, I don't think there's going to be another one of those. I think that's the last of Scientology's hurrahs when it comes to defrauding lower and middle class parishioners, because the credit card companies are wise to Scientology now, and they're not going to repeat those mistakes again. So they're not going to let Scientology take advantage of them the way they did through the chase wave. That advantage that Scientology took with the chase wave was like the third or fourth time they did that. going all the way back to the 70s when they set up a credit union and shit. I mean, Scientologists have been very creative over the years in how they have, you know, defrauded things. Yeah, no worries there. Okay, so that's kind of a bigger picture look I've been thinking about of around this question that I thought maybe I'd share. I don't know. Tell me what you think about all that, but just ideas I'm having about why Scientology is contracting. I don't think it's just the exposure. And if you look at people and how they are, yeah, I think that would make sense, right? It's not just because it's exposure, because there's been way, way, way more exposure of, say, the Catholic Church, political cults, other things, and they're still going strong, right? Relatively so. Okay. Okay, good. Let's carry on here. Turns out I will not be recording with Tony today. That was what I just got a message of, because he's feeling a little under the weather. So no worries there, but it allows us to go maybe a little bit more than usual today, but not too much more. We're going to wrap up before too long here. No worries. Next week then. You're literally seeing me work this out in real time right now. Sorry. Okay, let's get back to your questions. Okay. In Scientology, what is Q&A, a good thing or bad? Oh, okay. Yeah, let's talk about Scientology Q&A. I mentioned, actually kind of funny enough, I mentioned in this show earlier, start, change, stop, right? Or cause, distance, effect, like this beginning, middle, and end of a thing, right? In Scientology, Hubbard says communication is like that. You know, you say something, I say something to you, you answer me, I ask you a question, you answer me, I acknowledge you. That's a cycle of communication, right? I say something back to me, good, right? Q&A is when I divert from that formula and I throw something else into the mix, or you throw something else into the mix and I let you get away with it. I ask you, do birds fly? Maybe that's an auditing question, or maybe that's a question I'm asking you in life. Do birds fly? And you say to me, man, that refrigerator sure looks broken. Has nothing to do with my question. You just said something to me that is non sequitur to my question, doesn't address it in any way. If I take that up with you and acknowledge your new origination and don't get you back onto my question, this is called Q&A in Scientology. I'll give you more. So I say, do birds fly? And you say back to me, that refrigerator looks broken. If I would, the only thing I should be doing at that moment is saying to you, okay, I got it. Okay, wow, yeah, that refrigerator, that's a problem. Okay, I get it. Thank you for telling me that. Now I'm going to repeat my question, do birds fly? Get right back, right? You acknowledge what the person said, but then you get back to what you wanted to know from this person. You're going to get your question answered. You're not going to Q&A off of getting your question answered. See, Q&A is a verb here, right? It's something you're going to do, that it would be wrong for you to do it. You should not be Q&Aing with this person about the refrigerator. Don't do that. That's a distraction. It's a misdirection. It's not getting your question answered. And the whole point is to get your question answered. So, do birds fly? That refrigerator looks broken. Really? It looks broken? Why do you think that's broken? What's wrong with it? Well, look at it. The hinge is falling off. Oh, geez. What kind of place are you running here anyway with the refrigerators around here with hinges falling off? Why didn't you get it fixed? And now, instead of getting my question about the fish answered, we're having a whole conversation about the refrigerator. That's a Q&A. It's me Q&Aing with the person I'm talking to. Okay, that's how the word is used, or the expression is used in Scientology. Okay, there you go. Ms. Tara Green, how does Trump's and Vance's abusive behavior towards Zelensky compare to a severe reality adjustment in Scientology, or was it more like a mafia boss extorting? Great question, Tara. Ooh. Not far off. But an SRA is done at a much higher level of volume usually, and a lot more, it's a lot more of a kind of a grilling or a in your face. An SRA is absolutely meant to introvert you. Right? It is a bullying action in Scientology. Trump and Vance more so. Well, they were engaged in bullying, but the SRA, the only real SRA point there is that I can recall off the top of my head here. There was a lot being said, but there was a point where Trump said something along the lines of, you're causing or you're going to bring about World War III, right? Or you're messing with World War III, something like that. He said something along those lines. That was the SRA factor of this. The introverting statement, gaslighting the person into their causation for something I, as the bully, am actually doing to you. And I'm going to blame you for it, right? It's Darvo in a very, concentrated form, right? The deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, right? I mean, again, not technically, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it could be. But it's definitely severe reality adjustment, right? Scientology, right? I'm going to adjust your reality. That's what an SRA is in Scientology, is I'm going to fix your head, right? You're not looking at this right, and it's time you get it. And so you're the one who's causing this. You're the one who's bringing about World War III. You're the one who brought about the Russian invasion of Ukraine in the first place, you asshole. It's on you. You're the one who's at fault here. And you're therefore the one who's being unreasonable when we're just trying to help you. Like this whole attitude and flow of you fucking, that very, very much duplicates or mirrors what an SRA is or is trying to do to you in Scientology. Yes, that's a very, very good question. And on top of that, it was also mafia extortion, because there are mineral things, there are actual things, assets. We're really being real about the word to use. There are assets available to rich people, and they want them. And that's the condition that's now being made by the U.S., right? The official U.S. stance on this apparently is, yes, we'll help you for mineral rights in your country. And there's an awful lot of people, way, way, way too many people in this country who are happy to scapegoat Zelensky and the Ukrainians for the economic disparity they're feeling at the hands of people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk. It's Greek tragedy level of stupidity and irony and tragedy all rolled into one. That the people who support this clown posse show in the White House right now are the same people who are suffering the worst because of what Musk, Trump, and their group of clown posse billionaires are doing. That's how sick that is. But the tactics you describe here or ask about, yeah, nailing it. Sam Slade, many strains exist in the movement called anti-psychiatry. Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. Including certain psychiatrists who are skeptical of certain excesses. Yes. Is there room for reasonable non-Scientology criticism of psychiatry? Fuck yes, there is. You heard me give you some of that today. I talked about psychology and anthropology, and I very easily could have thrown psychiatry onto that list also. Psychiatry is supposed to be the treatment of mental abnormalities and mental health decline or mental health aberration or disorder. And yet you can't even define what good mental health is for an average human being across any social or cultural context. What the fuck? Like, what are we doing, right? It's like not being able to define what a healthy body is from a medical doctor point of view. If we're going to use a medical model for psychiatry, then they better be able to define what good mental health is as a baseline start of the process of figuring out how to treat mental health illnesses, right? You would think, but this is the subject of constant opinion, subjective analysis, and thought leaders and fads. And the less sciencey, hard sciencey stuff you have in a field or study, the more subjective nonsense you're going to have introduced. I mean, pretty, right? Even when you have hard measurements and hard sciences, look at how much opinion and subjectivity throws wrenches into the mix. Now you're going to talk about something where the measurements, the calculations, the quantitative study that gets done in psychiatry and psychology of mental processes is by definition subjective. There's no way for me to measure in any objective sense my anger and your anger. We cannot measure the subjective experience of that in a way that I can rate your anger a 5 and my anger a 6 on some objective scale. The experience of our anger, you understand. All we can measure is the outward signs of it. And the outward signs of a thing, as any of us know who have suppressed emotions, is no indication of what's actually going on inside a person. This is just one of a multitude of problems when you start talking about a scientific approach to studying emotion or studying behavior and root causes of those emotions and behaviors. And is that alone all there is or should be to the concept of good mental health? What about cultural factors? What about social factors? What about economic factors? All of them contribute to how we think about things and how we respond to things. And if how we think about things and how we respond to things is not what we're addressing with psychiatry and psychology, I don't know what we're addressing then, right? So the problems are legion. They are huge. And when people like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung are the thought leaders, then you know you've got massive problems with your field, because these were not scientific people. They were play acting at being scientific people, if we're really taking the gloves off and being serious about the history of psychiatry, right? It is rife with personal opinion, cultural bias, sexism, racism, all the isms. They're all there. And they're laid into the field. They're not just like problems that one or two individual practitioners or researchers had. It's all in there. And now we're questioning whether psychiatry should even be operating on a medical model at all. Was that the right way to go about this in the first place? Probably not. But at the same time, what is the right field when somebody is dancing around in front of you with a knife in their hand, talking about how they have to cut out your or their nerves because the nerves are making them nervous. And I mean, some crazy talk, right? Like some craziness, real madness. I mean, you obviously start thinking in terms of unhealthy, bad, right? Bad behavior, wrong, must cure this behavior. I mean, it's not hard to understand why you would go to a medical model with this. And maybe for some aspects of this, that is the way to go. And maybe some other aspects of it, medical really isn't the approach or the right way to deal with this any more than treating addiction as a criminal problem is a bit off. It's understandable, but it doesn't necessarily really make sense. These are all criticisms of psychiatry that I'm voicing here right now that are not original thinking to me. Not one thing I've said here is something I came up with. I've read or heard many groups out there who are trying to reform psychiatry. And some of them have some good points to make. You know, I mean, there's a very valid argument to be made that psychiatry went over a goddamn cliff when it came to its marriage with pharmaceuticals. Right? Just went right over a goddamn cliff. Good luck finding a psychiatrist who will actually listen to you and not just hand you a script. I don't think, and a lot of people don't think that should be the be-all end-all of a psychiatrist's job. I think that they are operating at the barest minimum of a job to listen to somebody for 10 minutes and hand them a script, right? Fortunately, my experience of psychiatrists has not been that. When I've had about 3 or 4 people I've seen psychiatrically, and when I run into somebody like that, I just go find somebody else because I don't want to be dealt with that way. And I've been lucky in that regard, right? I take a proactive approach to my mental health care when it comes to who I see and who I talk to about things. And if somebody's not cutting it, then they're gone, right? I don't mess around with that. I only deal with people I can trust and I can talk to, because you can't establish trust if you can't talk to somebody, right? So, yeah. Oh, I'm seeing some comments here from Luigi Foster. Sorry, just taking a look here. Yes, fair enough. Genetic and fMRI model studies have confirmed the medical model. They don't use knives. I am not at all sure what you mean by that, but modern psychiatry doesn't revere Freud. Okay. Maybe we've had different experiences of this particular thing, and maybe that itself is part of the problem. All right, let's carry on here. Oh, I threw Jono's question up there maybe a second ago. I'm not sure how long it's been up. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and get to that. Jono Nolan, when you become a staff member, is there a lot of peer pressure to become a smoker if you're not a smoker? No. No, I never experienced peer pressure to become a smoker, and I never peer pressured anybody else to, and I never observed that happening. I observed a lot of people smoking in Scientology because they came into it as smokers or because they picked it up themselves, and it was a thing that I didn't see anybody encouraging it, but I never once saw anybody discouraging it either. The only reason that smoking lessened in the Sea Org is because California passed laws that wouldn't allow you to smoke indoors around, I think, eating facilities and stuff. So we could no longer smoke in the main mess. And that cut down an awful lot of smoking by an awful lot of staff because they couldn't eat and smoke at the same time. And that was the only time and place where they generally were smoking during the day, is when they were eating. Because it's hard to take a break when you're in the Sea Org. You can do it on some jobs, but some jobs you can't. You're indoors all day long, and nobody's lighting up a cigarette in the middle of the course room or in the middle of the HGC or something, right? You just can't. They would smoke when they were doing regging, but after it became illegal to smoke inside, you know, you got to be on the phones. You got to be in front of people. You can't just take them all outside and have a smoke. So smoking by necessity of the law did more to cut down smoking in the Sea Org than peer pressure one way or the other. Anyway, that's what I can say about that. Yeah. Okay. We'll carry, what do we got here? We got a few more. All right, let's see if I can wrap these up before we go. Okay. Rhyme and reason. I see TRs and their other earlier actions like metering drills on the check sheet for high-level rundowns like the Ls. When a Scientologist goes in for high-level rundowns, do they have to redo these? I think you're talking about the check sheets to train auditors to deliver the L rundowns. In Scientology, you have training to become an auditor so that you can deliver auditing. There's a whole side of the bridge to total freedom, a whole side of the indoctrination path of Scientology that involves training, using an e-meter, doing TRs, reading Hubbard books, listening to his lectures, practicing the procedure of auditing, and then doing auditing. That's the training side of Scientology. When you're doing the training of Scientology, you will do TRs over and over and over again. You will do e-meter drills over and over and over again on different check sheets for different courses. Each course has a check sheet. You do the check sheet. That's how you do the course. There's very lengthy videos on this channel breaking all of this down as to how training works in Scientology. You can go check those out. So that's where TRs are done. That is where meter drills are done. When you flip over to the other half of the Scientology experience, you're talking about auditing, and you go up the bridge doing the auditing steps. At the bottom of the bridge, on the auditing side, there are TRs that you do. There's a middle step when you go onto the New Era Dianetics step, the NED step, the part most of the time right before you go clear. There is a step there where you do some TRs. But other than those two things, there's no other place, I feel safe in saying, there's no other place on the auditing side of the bridge where you're going to do TRs. As part of doing the auditing side of the bridge, if you never wanted to do any training at all, there's no way to do Scientology without doing a little bit of training. But if you wanted to keep it to a minimum, even if you didn't do any auditor training, while you're going up the bridge to go to OT, you have to train as a solo auditor. You have to train how to read the e-meter and how to use it to audit yourself on the OT levels. There's solo levels. It's just you in the room with an e-meter all by yourself. On that course, the solo auditor course, you have to learn how to use an e-meter, and you have to do some TRs. So that part of the auditing side of the bridge has TRs and meter drills on it. But that's only one time you're doing that course. If you need any correction as a solo auditor doing the OT levels, maybe you screw up in session, you don't do it right, you forget something, you're going to get a little correction assignment, and you'll go to a part of the org called qual, and you'll get what's called a cramming, where you will get corrected on the TRs or the metering that you messed up on, and so you might do a little bit more of that there. But otherwise, you're not going to be doing any more TRs or any other metering stuff. It's just on the solo auditor course, And you kind of do a whole nother solo auditor course at OT level 6. That's another run through the solo auditor course, basically. So that's where when you're doing the auditing side of the bridge, when you're doing rundowns, which is auditing, that's your exposure to TRs and to metering. I just laid down an awful lot of Scientologies. I hope that was all clear on this, because I'm doing this without having a bridge or anything here to point to and stuff. But there you go. Okay, John O'Nolan, what was your favorite city in Australia? The only one I really spent any time in was Perth, so I'll have to say Perth. But I want to see the ones on the east coast of Australia too, Sydney, Melbourne. I'd love to go over there. Perth was nice. It was nice. I liked it there. Rhyme and Reason. Why do the L's only include L 10, 11, and 12? What happened to L's 1 through 9? L stands for list. Okay, yeah, I'll say something about those comments, OBG Foster, in a second. L stands for list, okay? And there are many, many lists in Scientology to do different things. In auditing, there are correction lists to fix errors or problems in a session. There are assessment lists of pre-written items that are assessed on a person in order to do auditing actions on them. And there are these L rundowns that Hubbard made into these very, very super special rundowns that are supposed to produce this incredible, super powered, supercharged Thetan kind of result. And that's so L's L1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are just other lists that are used in other auditing somewhere, right? For example, there's an L4B, list 4 is a correction list that is used to correct errors in a very special kind of auditing process called listing and nulling, which is done in a lot of different places. So, you're getting your auditing, you're going up the bridge, and they do some listing and nulling on you, and we're not gonna have to worry about what that is. I'm just saying that's a process or a procedure that you use in auditing. And if you screw up the L and N, if you screw it up, you pull out list 4 and you assess it to correct your screw up. So that's list 4. There's a list 1. There's a L2. There is not an L3. There's an L3. L3, L4, BRB. I don't know about L5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I don't know what happened to those. Maybe they're confidential or they just fell out of use, right? But my point is that there were these different lists for different purposes, and that answers your question. And so there you go. Why was OTTR 5 removed from use? I don't know. I don't know if it was called OTTR 5. I think it was just TR5. Can't remember right now why that got canceled. It has. I think it moved over to another set of drills, if I remember right. But I'm gonna have to say I don't know on that one off the top of my head. Rhyme and Reason. I own a chrome e-meter and I'm aware they made copper and gold meters as well. Yes. Can you tell me about these special edition meters? Just a money grab for whales who want to show off their OT buds. Yes, that is exactly what they were. They plated e-meters, Mark 6 e-meters, and they've probably done it. They might have done this already with the new Mark 8s. They gold plated, silver plated, and copper plated Mark 6 and then later Mark 7 e-meters to sell them for about $25,000 each, purely as a fundraising action. And the meters were operational. You could use them. One time, I saw somebody bring a gold-plated e-meter into the course room and do drills with it. It's distracting as hell. It's very shiny. But that was just all they were. They were special edition meters. They were absolutely just a money grab for rich whales. And it was mostly done in the I think it was the 1990s when that idea was conceived of and put into action, if I remember right. And the 90s was the time when I think you start seeing a more apparent split in that economic thing that I was talking about with Scientology, where the lower and middle class parishioners kind of were doing less and less Scientology because they could afford it less and less, you know? And so you find stuff like this for the church to produce to supplement its income because it's not making enough money, you know, otherwise, right? Yeah, pretty much a money grab. Okay. Young Matador. Hey, Chris, do you ever try and detox from social media and the news nowadays? I find reruns of Joy of Painting with Bob Ross helps a lot. Great. Yes, I do. I have taken time away from social media. My wife and I did a podcast a few years ago after we took like a month off. And then we took a month off again, which we didn't broadcast or talk about too much, if I remember right. I think we talked about it in one of the Friday shows. It's a good idea to do that every now and again, you know. I asked my wife the other day about this because we were talking and arguing about this a little bit. Ooh, stomach feels a little funny. I shouldn't have drank that. Anyway, yeah, we were talking about this, and I asked her about, you know, where did you go to get information before the internet? How did you stay informed, you know? How did you keep in the loop on stuff? Something to think about. I'll just throw that out there. I know it's a silly question, kind of, but especially for some people who are watching this who never had anything else but the internet to look at. Something to think about, though. If the internet went down tomorrow, what would you do? How would you stay in the loop? What would you look at? Maybe go look at those. Get the hell off Facebook. Yeah, that's what I do. At least what I'm trying to do. No name in NW. We could have stopped it before it started by simply stating the Ukraine will not be admitted to NATO again after 2 months when Russia stopped from Kiev front. Now it's harder as Russia has more land. Maybe. I think that it's very important that more Americans, let me say this in response to that. I will say maybe, but if you get into Putin's head a little bit deeper, which I would invite you to do, and there are sources of information to do that, you'll see that there are ways of thinking in this world that go far beyond the way we in America think about things. Very different contexts of things, and Putin's approach to the world and how he thinks about his world and whatnot is not obvious. So I would encourage you to find out more about that. Because there are an awful lot of people in America who think in and I'm not saying this is you, no name in NW, in any way. This question just brings this to mind. There are an awful lot of people in America who are incredibly, and I mean this, I'm not talking about you. You just made me think of it. There are people in America who are very simple-minded about our foreign affairs and our foreign relationships. They think about it in ways that are incredibly unrealistic, and there is a bizarre level of magical thinking involved in foreign affairs from the point of view of Americans, many of whom have not even been outside of the country once. And they have no concept of just how different the world really is from here, or how different it could be because they're stuck here. and they only think in terms of how Americans think of things. And they're very fixated on the American first point of view. Oddly, a bunch of people who are in charge now really have this America first thing as front and center in their way of thinking about the world. But if you want to understand why the world works the way that it does, you can't think that way. Because if you do, then it will be as gross an error as trying to understand why New Yorkers do what they do because you understand how Scientologists do what they do. In other words, you're taking a wrong paradigm and applying it to a group of people. You can't treat New Yorkers like you do Scientologists. It's two different classes of people who think very differently. Their whole approach to life is very different. Well, you go to another country and you go to the leadership of another country like Russia, man, you're just talking about a whole different kettle of fish. And most Americans don't even begin to understand that concept, much less understand the point of view of somebody who is not American. So when we make, now bringing it back to your question, No Name, right, where I am going to be slightly critical of your question, or of your statement here, when you say we could have stopped it, you have no idea what we could or couldn't have done because you're not in Putin's head. And Putin is the one who could or couldn't have stopped it, not us. We don't have the ability to order sovereign nations around without using strong-arm authoritarian tactics like Trump is using now. And even then, it's not really about controlling things for the better. It's about, you know, advantage and strong-arming and mafia boss sort of approach to ruling, to governing. Which is why we're entering a strongman phase of world affairs, and why the world is going to reorganize around strong-arm, dictator, authoritarian type thinking. So I don't agree with you that we actually could have stopped it by simply stating that Ukraine will not be admitted. It's not our call alone as to whether a country is or isn't admitted to NATO. Just as one basic statement. You know, and anyway, so I will just kind of counter that thought with, if only it were so simple. E. Phoenix Art, what are your thoughts on Hubbard's Mission Earth Decology? I talked about this last week, I think. Oh shit, I didn't get to those preset questions because we were so going... we were so going to town on all of your questions. I completely forgot about those two preset ones. Damn it. Sorry, guys, I'm a little over the place. Okay, we're going to wrap up these, and I will save those questions for next week. I apologize that I did not get to those today with my grossly dispersed thinking here. Getting back to your question, I think that Hubbard's Mission Earth Decology is awful. I really, really, really did not enjoy reading it. As a Scientologist, I was done after book 3, and it kept going and going and going. I read them when I was still a public Scientologist and new staff member back in the 80s when they were coming out or after they had just come out. I seem to remember reading them serially as they came out. And by the end, I was just reading them for the sake of reading them, you know, out of loyalty to Hubbard, excuse me. It was not because I was enjoying it. I really hated those books. Yeah. I guess I could do a thing on it, but I'll just say that for now. I hated those fucking books. All right. Apple cider vinegar. There are, let me just check something over here. There are studies of those spend more time than a certain amount of time per day in meditation, and they sleep less well, need less sleep. They're similar from people in cult and hypnotic states often. Okay, that is an interestingly phrased question, apple cider. I mean, there are studies of those. I am not able to speak about sleep and hypnosis and meditation in any kind of educated way, so I'm going to bounce on this question because my answer is going to be a big I don't know, and I don't want to conjecture about that. Jay asks me, Chris, are you open to recommendations on books? Yes, I am. I just finished listening to what I consider a very insightful book that I think you would be interested in. Please send me the recommendation. I have a wealth of book recommendations. I have a pile of 7 books on my desk right now that I have stacked to read. I'm not at all saying this to discourage any of you from sending me book recommendations. I'm just telling you, that's my life. And you can tell from, how hyper focused I am today that, it is sometimes a little hard for me to get to these books. But please do send me your recommendations. I am interested in reading and learning always. Even if I don't sound like it all the time, I am. Okay, good. Thank you for your commentary. Something was said earlier. Oh, yes, OBG Foster. Here's what I wanted to say. I think I got what you were saying in your comments, or at least some of the ones that I read, in terms of disagreeing with me about certain things, and it should be a medical model and that sort of thing, and that's all fine. I am going to say that I think it is I think it's a deficiency and a gross disservice that psychiatry has devolved into prescription writing. And whether the view of you watching this is that, well, that's all it should be, I disagree. If that's your view, I disagree. I think that psychiatry is if it's going to be the treatment of abnormal or irrational behavior, that it by necessity must be more than handing out prescriptions. And if that includes talk therapy in some cases, yes, I think that they are actually, I think the whole thing needs a big reorganization. That's what I think. But I don't think the medical model is, or that way of thinking about things is wrong as such. Like, in other words, I don't think it shouldn't exist, but I think it's only a part of how you achieve what the field is purporting to try to achieve, right? Which is recovery from or healing or adjustment in the direction of good mental health. I think that by necessity, that requires more than just giving people drugs or just talking to them. I think it involves a lot of stuff that we're not even remotely close to doing with our people. And the accessibility problem of getting a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist to even be in front of you in the first place is so unmanageable and difficult that is the main barrier to getting people any help in the first place. Before you even get to how we're treating them, just getting to the point of giving somebody some help or treatment is so difficult these days. So there's a lot of problems connected with all of this. I have been going on at a mad rate for 2.5 hours. I am really tired now, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Lot covered here. Thanks for coming around and watching me blabber on at a mad rate about all of this, guys. Really appreciate your viewership and your support. And the fact that you care enough to want to hear what I have to say about anything. Thanks, really, for coming around and listening to me. If you have any suggestions, comments, criticisms, feedback, go ahead and leave them in the comments section to this video. I'm very keenly interested in how I can do better at this show or with the work that I'm doing here. So let me know. And I always appreciate the compliments, of course. And I always appreciate the support. If you want to support me through Patreon, that would be awesome. I would very, very much like to build that back up to a viable amount, because right now I'm definitely not operating that way. And anything I can do to improve that or improve this experience for you all on my channel, just let me know, and I will see what I can do to enact that change. be the change you want, or something like that. All right, anyway, thanks guys. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.